want to thank everyone. I hope everyone's liver is okay from last night from all the drinking and the party that we threw. It was, I'm going to walk you through, it's a Pecha Kucha model. That means I'm going to speak 20 seconds per slide. So you have to stay focused, you have to pay attention, and so that no one can fall asleep, and don't look at your phones because you may miss a very captivating, informative slide. So are you ready? On your mark, get set, go. So first of all, when you talk about crypto and crypto mining stocks, you have to understand the DNA of volatility. The previous page you saw gave you all these disclosures, which very few people actually read and understand. But it's really about volatility, and if you look at litigation, it's usually around the volatility of an asset class. So each asset class has its own DNA of volatility. And what's important here is to look at gold is up or down 1%, 70% of the time in a day, and over 10 days is 3%. But when you go to Bitcoin, it's 3% a day, it's 10% over 10 days. And when you look at MicroStrategy, it's 7%, so he's 7 times more volatile. But when you look at HIVE, it's also 7 times more volatile on a daily basis. And if you go over 10 days, we're talking about 27% daily, 10-day volatility. So before you go into an asset class like this, pray. And as Sir John Templeton said, most people buy a stock and then pray that it will go up. His difference was that he prays before he buys the stock. So I hope this sort of helps you to understand what industry we're in. But when you look at 12 months, the volatility here, as you can see, Bitcoin is down 38%, we're down 69%. But year to date, Bitcoin is up, and so we are up twice what Bitcoin is. So you get this incredible magnitude of a crypto mining stock relative to Bitcoin. And the same thing happens with gold stocks. If the price of gold goes up 10%, the gold stocks are going to go up 20. It's recognizing that difference. So now I'd like to come back to the history. Blockchain was invented in '91. I believe it was out of Berkeley, and it was used originally from the telecom industry. 10 years later, SHA-256, which is the encryption algorithm you use for your iPhone for facial recognition, it was created by the Department of Defense of the US government, I believe by DARPA, and then 8 years later, Bitcoin is created. So really, it's an American invention, it's a creativity, and it's all part of the great digital, in my opinion, the great digital transformation we're all going through. Now, what is important to recognize is that the Bitcoin ecosystem so often go to the Old Testament of fiat money destruction. And it's the same thing that gold bugs go to. But so often they argue with each other, but I would just say my vintage is baby boomers, and we're more related to gold, and I'm known for gold. I've written books on gold, so I went into the launching of HIVE blockchain, the first crypto mining company, as a proxy. And the other crypto mining companies speaking today, and Fred Thiel spoke yesterday, we are literally proxies for this industry, and we have a movement that goes with the. And you can see today Citadel Capital basically trades a basket every minute off the Bitcoin price of these stocks. So who's driving it? And where are the millennials and Generation X, Ys, and Zs, the next host of who are going to inherit the baby boomers' wealth? And where do they get their information? And they get it from Facebook, they get it from YouTube, they get it from Instagram and Reddit. So you have one particular person on Reddit that has 13.5 million followers. So what does that mean? That means if 1 million of his followers go to Robinhood to spend $1,000, we're talking about $1 billion going into that asset class. And that's why they bankrupted a hedge fund that was shorting GameStop, and they all of a sudden piled into GameStop. And if you're a YouTuber and you have 1 million followers, you can make $1 million a year of shared revenue, and you don't have a compliance department, you don't have to buy ASIC chips, you just have to be able to have great content that these followers are following you. And it's recognizing how they move markets, and then Twitter has 450 million users, but how they also will influence markets and flow. This is where a lot of the crypto ecosystem get their information from. They're not getting it from Wall Street. They're not getting from the city here. So now what's driving, I'm going to start macro, I'm going to go to micro. What's driving this year is the U.S. commercial banks' unrealized gains and losses, because most of these young CIOs at the banks were doing what's called a bar trade, a barbelling trade in a bond market, and that's a big mistake if you don't know how to pivot. And you have to be able to move your portfolio. Most of them what they call laddering, but really, if you look at the portfolios, they're offside over $600 billion. That information and a lot of the negativity of Credit Suisse before it went bankrupt was a year ago, and Deutsche Bank was a year ago on Twitter. So how fast they go with a meme? No one pays them. Bitcoin has no CEO, and it trades almost $300 million a day, and it has no marketing budget. And what happens with these kids, I like to call them, is that they go and buy a stock, and they immediately go and create a meme, and they post it. And they create their own sort of dialogue of conversation of how they relate to their investments. But immediately after Silicon Bank went bankrupt, someone does this, and they're out front of the Silicon Bank giving out water of why you should be long Bitcoin, because it trades 24/7, and you don't have to worry about it being lent out or something crazy with your assets. So they're passionate. And then you turn around and you see these type of publications, because when we have which really surprised me, Barney Frank is sort of the godfather of Sarbanes-Oxley, and he is on the board of Signature Bank, and on Friday everything's okay, and on the weekend they're insolvent. So he was so surprised by that, but immediately these memes come out, and they're posted on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're all over, and this drives flows and traffic, in particular, more so in America than over in Europe. Because if you take a look at almost 40% of Americans are saving and investing, whereas only about 10% over in Europe. This is a great case study at Harvard Business School. Every year I go with a group of YPOers, and I become a student again, and have to spend 60 hours of studying, and this year was all about the great digital transformation, and this was the last case study. Now, how many here participated in the 10,000 drops to be able to get one of these incredible pieces of art? Anyone here? Well, how do you compete in a stock market when your $200 investment to buy one of these unique pieces of digital art, you made $600,000 in a year? So get this straight, $200 to $600,000. And they created, and the two people behind this were kids in 2017 doing creative writing. They weren't coders. They didn't have an MBA from Wharton. They didn't have they were writing about the culture of crypto. And what I learned in this journey of launching HIVE was that there was at one time before Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, that there were 30 million kids around the world mining Ethereum. And they may mine 1 to 2 coins. They're gamers, designers, and they would go to bed. Someone else would pay that utility bill, and they would be able to mine 2 to 3 coins a year. And this is the additional revenue they lived off of. So this ecosystem is all over the world, and where they get their research, as I mentioned earlier, is not the normal centralized channels of information. So the macro forces right now, the geopolitics, climate change, energy policies, demographics, and choke point with the regulatory world that we're dealing with. So let me talk about the macro forces. China's GDP is $18 trillion. America's running around 24. Going 10 years ago, they were 1/10. So they've had, in the past 5 years, a doubling. It's phenomenal growth, but now they have economic clout. They are 10 times the GDP of Russia. So this is the first time America is fighting two Cold Wars at the same time. And this creates another different dynamic that is well covered in that crypto ecosystem of information. So this is another visual to give you an idea of comparing the EU of 382 million, 335 million in America. As you can see, America is still the highest nominal GDP, and GDP per capita is far greater than what's in Europe. And so when you turn around and think of a war that's taking place in the Ukraine, and China is all of a sudden supporting Russia with economic trade from oil and metals, etc., it's basically sustaining this battle that's taking place in Ukraine, because everyone thought that Russia would basically implode, but it's not. And we see these type of visuals taking place where China is treasury holdings at the lowest level since the global financial crisis. And then we see China's Xi meeting with Saudi Crown Prince, and they've been increasing their gold behind their digital money. And because they've increased their gold exposure, which came out in December, then all of a sudden you started seeing a dynamic change take place with the price of gold, and at the same time what's happening with crypto. And then we turn around and see only 10 days ago, Xi meeting with Putin in Moscow. And then China and Brazil reached out a deal in trade with their own currencies, and they want to create the BRICS currency. So there is a decoupling of the US dollar in trade. And this is all of a sudden igniting gold, and it's also igniting Bitcoin and the crypto ecosystem. And then we saw this only the past week, China and France complete the first gas trade using CBDC's digital yuan. And this is another visual to show you of China's trade with Russia. So Russia is not imploding, even though the US froze $350 billion of their assets and did everything to try to contain them. They're now also expanding their activity with India. So it's record trade between Russia, China, and India. And remember that China and India, affectionately known as Chindia, is 40% of the world's population. And they have a rising GDP that's much greater. I know this so well because in the world of gold, 60% of all gold demand is love. And it all comes from predominantly Chindia. And so you can see that as rising GDP per capita, the buying of gold takes place every time there's a big dip. You'll see the buying come out of Asia. So last year at this time, just about a month from now, we started going through Three Arrows Capital, and we had this contagion that took place. And Sam Bankman-Fried the crypto ecosystem, and in particular because he made it political. And that was the big part when it came out of giving $100 million away, and predominantly to politicians and predominantly to the Democratic Party. Democratic Party's in power, so all of a sudden they have to go anti-crypto, and we have to live with that. But what's fascinating to me is that this year, it doesn't matter, Bitcoin is up substantially, and so are the crypto miners. And we hear about Choke Point 2.0, about the sort of the cooperation that's taken place with all the government agencies. And it doesn't really matter at this stage because the ecosystem is so big around the world. There are over 12,000 nodes around the world validating transactions. There are not 12,000 technology analysts, and there are not 12,000 gold analysts that are out there telling you about this space, but there are 12,000 Bitcoin nodes. So this is something to understand and grasp the significance. And we're very proud, first to go public, first to develop our own ASIC mining rig, first to buy your data centers, first to go green. We're also first to do balancing with the grid in Sweden. And in particular, that helped us out last year, being able to sell our energy back. So the whole team is here, which is great because they're going to give you the granularity of the HIVE story. So HIVE does the lowest share-based comp, it's the lowest in dilution and lowest in G&A and so there's different people that provide research for this, but we're very proud of having the lowest G&A per Bitcoin mined. And it's not to say that anyone is underpaid, everyone is well paid, and we have our own unique culture of how we run the business. This is another way of looking Bitcoin mined per exahash. And this is shareholder dilution is a key to highest return on invested capital. However, in Canada, the accounting board has been pushed, the auditors, to turn around to push you to write everything down. They just basically, the concern on the negativity towards crypto mining or anything in this space has made it really challenging that you have to just basically write down all your assets. Not only do you write down the Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin can go back up, so we get mark to market in Canada that you don't get in the US, but your equipment you don't. So this is to give you year to date. We're up 130%. Bitfarms is up 113. HIVE's up 110, and Bitcoin's up 70%. So you can see it's basically 2 to 1. And what's amazing is that all of us have been able to survive this whole rise in the Bitcoin difficulty. This is margin compression. And so fortunate Bitcoin's gone over 30,000. It's given a reprieve because a year ago we were enjoying 90% gross margins, followed to 25%, and now we're starting to get margin expansion again. There's Ivan. I need to turn around and was able to negotiate a special deal with Intel, and he can give you more detail. He's up here in the front row. And Anthony Power, last year he was here. I didn't see him this time. Is he in the room? He's not. So Anthony is an accountant that retired, and he started following the crypto industry, and he published on a regular basis relative analysis, and he gives you sort of different perspectives of the industry as a whole. But really, what's interesting is we all trade as a basket. This is where we're expanded in Canada on the border of Maine. This is where we're recycling our energy from a 40,000 square foot building into a 200,000 square foot building. So that same hydroelectricity, molecule of electricity gets recycled. This is the expansion in the future, what we're looking at in Sweden, where we'll have a greenhouse, 90,000 square feet, and we'll produce all the cucumbers and tomatoes that are necessary, so there'll be no carbon footprint, but we're recycling our hydroelectricity. We also sponsored the local hockey arena, and that's the team. And this has been one of the enemies of the crypto industry, the head of the Bank of International Settlements, and he's been everything about anti-crypto because he's pushing to have their own digital currency. In fact, they wrote a white paper, and we published videos that highlight a white paper that the Bank of International Settlements wrote that's going to take you 45 minutes to read. We condense it to 3 minutes on our website. Time's up. I want to thank you all. Hopefully you were able to pay attention. I noticed no one looked at their phones, so that meant everyone was engaged. And now we're going to have an exciting panel, and you'll hear some other great stories from other crypto miners.